Welcome to 101. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. It's a big day here at PAC 14. We have a man in the house who's got probably the most challenging job in the city of Salisbury, Ron Strickler, the Director of Housing and Community Development for the city of Salisbury. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So when you look at what your office does, it's a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a wide variety of things, too. So the department encompasses three major divisions: code enforcement, more so recently picked up parking enforcement as well. We have the community relations team, which operates our two community centers, neighborhood walks, acts as a liaison between city administration, mayor's office, and all of the community. And then the last is housing and homeless services, which, we're continuing to see an uptick in the number of individuals that are ending up on the street. We're trying to address that best we can as a government agency.
Well, it's interesting because the real connection between citizens and the city is your department. And that's where people end up being affected by government so much, where they have touch points with government. Mm-hmm. And you guys are really out there communicating with people in these neighborhoods.
Yeah, in two ways, right? So, and this is where it's tough. It sometimes can be difficult to find a balance. My code enforcement team is out there, obviously trying to beautify the neighborhoods, make sure every property is up to code, sometimes writing corrective action letters, citations if they get to that point. So we have some folks that end up upset or concerned, but part of that teaching moment is understanding these corrective action letters aren't citations. Nobody's in trouble. We want people to finish that work themselves. And then on the opposite end, with the community relations team, when we're going out to these neighborhood walks or these pop-up bus stops, we're taking members of code enforcement with us and other departments throughout the city as a way to reach out to citizens and let them know what services are new, what we can offer. So we try and participate in those things so people can get to know who we are, how we can help them, and if they need help, who they can come to.
There's so much historical stress between the city and neighborhoods. And one of the stress points, which it seems to have evaporated, and you can maybe help me understand why, there used to be a lot of problem with the students in the neighborhoods. And we had the old 4-2, 2-1 legislation. I don't hear about stress between students and neighborhood residents like I used to.
Yeah, and I can't speak to anything before my time. I've been with the city for 3 years, and I think that 4-2 legislation was passed back in 2006.
Right.
And there was an exemption period. Periodically we do have complaints from properties that weren't officially converted that we need to address, actively, where they have moved non-single family and maybe some college students into a property. We'll do that investigation and determine if it is in fact an illegal rental and get that course corrected. We do hear from time to time issues. We try to work with the university. We have a good relationship. Rachel, our community relations manager, has a great relationship with the folks over at the university, specifically in the housing. So when we have issues that we can't address necessarily, outside of a noise complaint, and PD's going to handle that anyway. If they're not violating any housing laws, we try to partner with SU and get on top of it. And residents are, very good in understanding that. So it takes time each year that those college students change at those houses throughout the neighborhoods. I think we're going to have to be creative in our approach to housing moving forward, and you'll see that in a zoning code change. But this is universal. This is across the country, where these zoning laws are so restrictive that actually prevents you from, if you tear a house down, you can't rebuild it because of these setback requirements, or there's been talk are we restricting housing by having this 4-2 program, but it's a double-edged sword, right? Some folks have lived in these neighborhoods their entire lives, so you have to try and find a balance, but also be able to provide housing, which I think the last I checked we're about 97% capacity. So we do have to get creative in our approach to make sure as Salisbury continues to grow, which we know is happening. We know that there's many projects under development right now that are going to provide more housing. So I think you'll just continue to see that evolve, and we try and support the neighborhood folks as much as possible. But generally, I would say it really depends what time of year it is. With the college students.
Right.
And as you get closer to the end of the spring, you see a little bit more of an uptick and folks moving on and one last hurrah. But generally, we encourage neighbors to talk. And we've seen that happen, and we've seen it been proactive. It's usually when those talks break down that we have to get involved.
We have landlord licensing now, and when that was implemented, it was a huge deal. It was fought for years, but it seems to me like it's been a success.
Well, it is a success in many ways. So, I mean, the goal of the program, in my opinion, is just protecting the tenant, right? And if you don't have an inspection process, how can you do that? Are you meeting Maryland standards of livability, which is something all properties should be meeting throughout the state? And that's what we're checking for when we go in there. It's just to make sure everything that's supposed to be there, by law, is there by law. And we've seen some adjustments to it over the years. I want to say we have about 95 or 9,600 units right now, and about, I think, 1,200 landlord licenses. So that's the landlord, the entity that owns the property, and then you have these 9,600 units. So Salisbury only has about 13,000 housing units. We're at about 75% rental. I think it's important that we continue with that program. I would like to expand our inspection process. When it was first started, there was no, if a property transferred, you have to fill out an affidavit, that type of thing. Now, and there is something written in the code so that you can do an inspection at any time as long as you notify the property owner. And that's really how it started. They would try to hit as many properties as they could. I still, to this day, I'm not sure that we've hit every single rental unit in the city. When we get an opportunity to, we've had some shifting in our department, and now we have an assistant director, Mike Thomason, a former code enforcement officer. And he's really taking the lead on trying to develop some type of random inspection program so that we can get in and see some of these properties we might not have seen, fairness across the board. But yeah, I think it's been very successful. Obviously, it does generate revenue, but we're providing a service to the individuals that live in these 9,600 units that I think is something that we should be doing. We should be protecting, their rights as tenants to an extent.
You said about 75% of our housing is rental. I remember 20, 25 years ago when it crossed over the 50% threshold, and everyone was very alarmed that the city was on the wrong track. But now we've learned so much more about rentals. The new generations aren't necessarily interested in owning a house. They like the flexibility of a rental. That might be the future.
Yeah. I think back to, as I was coming out of college, and I think I rented for probably about 6 months, and I was like, well, I'm just throwing money away. I'm going to buy something. So I've been a homeowner ever since that point in time. There's some great programs out there. Interest rates aren't real great right now. So it does make sense to rent. And you think about it over the course of if you're not staying somewhere for a long period of time, or you expect, and we have the hospital here, we've got the Purdue, we've got all these different chicken factories that people are working at, and sometimes that ebb and flows. So they might not be able to commit to buying a house in Salisbury. We continue to offer home ownership programs. If properties are converted from rentals, we continue to offer that program. But yeah, generally, I don't see it changing. Rental business is a lucrative business for landlords. Not so much in the last 3 years, with everything that we've gone through with COVID. It's put some property owners in some tough spots. Now you're seeing, as a result of that, as we come out of COVID, these skyrocketing prices. 21% increase in rent across the country. And that's accurate here in Salisbury too. As we look at our housing programs, or what HUD provides for homeowner assistance or renter assistance for chronically homeless, what they're providing doesn't even meet what we need to have a one-bedroom property in Salisbury. And I think you see it everywhere. It's not just housing, it's gas, it's groceries. So we have to continue to find ways to counteract that. But I think that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles. There's really not much we can do to control rent. I think, we'd be violating, some major issues if we would say to somebody, you can't raise your rent, that type of thing, for an extended period of time, or because it's too expensive. Business is business, and it's not our job to interfere with that. So,
as editor, when I was editor of the Daily, I used to get a taste of what your work was like, because people would get cited for things at their units, and then they would send me the stuff to print in the paper because they wanted to be outraged that the city was, overreacting to stuff. And one of the attitudes was, well, yeah, it's not up to code, but it's just a rental. It's an old building. Who cares? And I would go, but no, you've got to cut your grass. You've got to fix your windows. And you can't wire your plumbing. You can't, configure your plumbing like that. It's a violation of code. You have to be up to code. But people did not seem to understand that.
Yeah, and I think there's been I know just since I've started, but even a little bit before that, there's been a shift in code enforcement in general. I think it's pretty much not across the board, but close to it, and our approach to code is, it's not necessarily the word of the code, it's the spirit of the code, right? And our goal is always going to be to have the homeowner comply with the request. And we don't want to have to go out there and cut a property, that takes time away from our staff. It costs money, that we're just going to recoup on the back end, maybe, further down the road. But that, it's more of a proactive approach to this educational piece. And this is where community relations comes in. And when we do our neighborhood walks, we're sharing, hey, these are the top 10 code violations. But I can't tell you how many times over the last 3 years that, I've gotten a couple phone calls where an older woman was distraught. She's lived in Salisbury her whole life, never received a citation.
Right.
And asked, well, it's a corrective action letter. Yeah, there's a couple weeds in the sidewalk. We'll be happy to come out and meet with you and talk about, how you can prevent this from happening in the future. But I think, versus that kind of bringing the book down on folks, that approach works a lot better. You're never going to make everybody happy. But, we're trying to provide as much information as we can. And as, we see these diverse cultures coming into Salisbury, speaking different languages, we try and accommodate folks. A lot of our stuff is going out in multiple languages. Generally, it's Spanish, English, Korean, and Haitian Creole. So, we try and, be fair across the board. And generally, most folks want to comply. I mean, it's proven. If you look at some of these neighborhoods throughout the city, you see one property turn around, and all of a sudden, as you work down that street, everything else starts looking nicer. Oh, ours is nice. So they're going to hold their neighbors accountable.
Right.
And that's really what happens. We try not to get involved in any neighbor wars, but it happens from time to time, and it's our responsibility if somebody lodges a complaint that we go out and address it. But a lot of times when we do that, we're going to go out and address the whole street. If we're out in an area, we're going to, and so sometimes the complainant receives, and it's like we're not ever targeting anyone. It's just an opportunity to be in an area they might not have been in a week or so. So. Yeah, I think it's definitely been a good approach for us.
Yeah, when I go over like North Boulevard, Florida Avenue, Maryland Avenue, I've been anticipating those neighborhoods to decline, but they're not. They're hanging in there.
Yeah, and they're actually, you're seeing some of these, just as you drive down some of these areas, it's kind of a community-wide effort. I mean, if you look at the Church Street area, the Adopt a Block's getting ready to open over off of Benny, excuse me.
Yeah, Benny Street.
Yeah, and what Brian did over there with his building,
right?
What's coming in the future? Hopefully,
yeah, we know about the Hotel Esther.
Right.
We don't have the story yet, but we know that's coming.
Yeah, I think that those transformational pieces, and again, you see this one spot change, and now you're seeing other spots around there where they're fixing up. As you drive down Church Street through the 1100 block, and there's one on the 1000 block right now that they're completely redoing and stoning, and that just kind of keeps going. And I think that that our focus has really been in some revitalization in those areas. I know we're going to be going after some revitalization money. We have some targeted areas we want to make some improvements to. So we continue to acquire and also sell properties to focus on these areas. And this is a program that was set up a long time ago that allows us to do it. So, we're going to try and make some movement over the next couple of years if we can.
What is the rule on sidewalks? It comes up every year when it snows. What is the property owner's responsibility on sidewalks?
They're responsible for clearing the sidewalks themselves. They have, I want to say you got me on this one. I want to say it's 24 hours, but it could be up to 48 hours. That after snow stops, that they would clear the sidewalks. And that's always a topic of conversation with sidewalks and who's responsible for sidewalks. And actually, with the sidewalk and then the street pan, that section of the road is actually the responsibility of the property owner. And that's basically for street sweepers, right? You can't have any obnoxious growth
Right.
coming up through, the sidewalk and along the road there. We don't really write that as much, but weeds in the sidewalk, it seems like when it's hot and dry, for whatever reason, they want to come up through the sidewalk. And, the best way to get rid of that is with a screwdriver.
Right.
You get the dirt out of there, because you weed whack it, it's going to grow up again. But yeah, we hear a lot about the weeds in the sidewalk, and old Mayor Day was he was adamant on sidewalks, but I understand why. People travel up and down those sidewalks, and ultimately it is the responsibility of the property owner for a large gamut of things for that sidewalk area. So
These neighborhood things that you do, where you go out and you meet with the neighbors, I would think I would rather just be in my office and do my job. And going out and meeting with the people would be awkward for me. But you guys really seem to embrace this, and it seems to really help.
yeah, I mean, some of the things that have stood out to me in these neighborhood walks that we've done in the past. Well, one last year, we were over on Lake Street and Lake Street Playground, and we walked that area. So we go out, knock on doors. So there's an approach to knocking on a door. So we work with everybody to explain that. And one of the comments that I've heard is, this is the first time anybody's ever talked to me for the city of Salisbury.
Yeah.
And this woman was probably in her 60s. So she was excited to have us there and to know that we care what they think, and that's really what that's about. And if you do it and you don't do anything about it, that's the follow-up piece to these neighborhood walks is what's so important. So as we're walking through the neighborhood, we're knocking on doors, we're asking them if they have any concerns. And those concerns can be anything. Can be police related, or providing smoke alarms if they don't have smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors if they don't have them. Usually a fire department's coming out with those types of things. Hopefully it's not a rental because they're required to have those.
Right.
But where they're providing information on fire safety. If we get a complaint from a resident while we're out there that there's some activity going on in that neighborhood that PD needs to know about, we'll give that information to PD. If it's an issue with a sign or the street cracking or the storm drain, we'll forward that over to DID or field ops, and then each department is responsible for following up on those, those issues. And that's really what the goal of that is. We cook out, we usually find our location, we do burgers, hot dogs, invite everybody out. Sometimes we have good turnout, sometimes we don't. But the general consensus is thank you. Thank you for coming out here into our neighborhood, and spending time with us and listening to what our concerns are.
That North Camden, Newton Street area was always a priority area, a lot of concern about what the future would be like there. I've got a very personal connection to that neighborhood because I delivered papers there when I was a kid. So I've seen the gentrification and all the changes in that neighborhood. But that community center on Newton Street, boy, it looks like a success to me.
Yeah, it's and it's evolving. As we build partnerships and what we offer and what community groups are going to come in. Like one of the big things that we've been trying to get started over there is just some type of food service program, not necessarily something that, we're providing meals, but we've been looking at doing, we have a full commercial kitchen over there doing some culinary stuff.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Working with Warwick. But, just recently, actually, I think it's I want to say it's the 7th or the 6th. I can't remember off the top of my head. But we're doing basically a dinner night, and it's free. So the folks from over at Warwick and Market Street Inn are going to provide meals to the community.
Wow.
Out of that. And so we have a ukulele class that's over there. So we've asked them, that's normally that night, hey, do you want to play for folks, whether they're eating at the center or they're coming to get it? And that's that's kind of that whole idea of that community center there. It's still continues to be an area that with PD issues. But the community center has really put a focus on that because now there's kids coming up and down the streets, and now there's parents and grandparents looking out for those kids. So I think, we hope, that community center is going to help clean up some of the, things that are happening over there, and you're kind of already seeing it happen. And it's a community that really has been underserved, and that Light Street, Maryland, Smith. But it is definitely an area that we need to focus on to continue to get better, because you see that surrounding area. It's just, once you get to a certain street, then it's like all of a sudden, you've got activities going on that, you wouldn't expect to see 2 streets down if it's on Ohio, Hazel, as you move up through. So, we're getting ready to demolish a property over there on Smith Street that's been an issue. We've turned some housing around over on the corner of Maryland and Smith. That was a vacant property that was causing issues for years. We're getting ready. The owner's getting ready to get that unit online. And that was part of a non-conforming use zoning exemption program we created. If you can get rid of those vacant buildings where activities are happening that shouldn't be, I think that it'll continue to grow. But that center, I think, will just continue to do great things. And like I said, it's evolving. More and more things are happening. Get the after-school program. We got summer programming. We have groups that come in and use the site. Warwick's running GED and ESOL classes out of the site in the evening. So the building's definitely getting used.
Yeah, I ride my bike a lot from downtown to SU and back, and I should take the bike path on Waverly, especially with all the controversy from it. But I do Light Street and Smith Street just to see what's going on in those neighborhoods. And there's a different vibe. There really is, since the center's there.
Yeah, well, then you have, you're starting to surround that area, and you got the Tot Lot Park right there. We're looking at ways that we can get that cleaned up, or what will be more beneficial. But then you have the community garden right behind it. So it's really this full community effort. You've got professors from over at the university that are vested in the success of that area, that will put time and effort in, and provide students to put time and effort in through programs at SU, which is important. We relied heavily on that. We participated with the PACE program, since I've been here, and even before that. And Ryan Weaver, he's been a big...
Isn't he great? He's great, yeah.
Yes, he is. And Tim Stock, Tim's been a big part of that as well. So, but those guys live there, and they want to see it continue to get better, and they're doing what they can to support us as a government agency. So,
Truett Street, the other community center, being expanded right now.
Yep.
Another great success story for that Doverdale neighborhood.
Yeah, we, that's the one thing coming in and looking at what we were offering at Truett Street at that time. And I came in right the heat of COVID, so I was walking into an office with very few people there. No recreational activities were happening. And we slowly eased back into it. Like, we realized this department is not recreation and parks. We can't offer programming in the sense that you may have from Wycomico County Recreation and Parks. We don't have the staff, we don't have the budget. So we were looking at creative ways. Like, we've always worked with a few different community partners, but Governor Hogan at the time had proposed putting a Boys and Girls Club in each county, and I knew it was happening in Cambridge, and I knew they wanted to move down through the Eastern Shore. And we met on site with a consultant and folks from the Boys and Girls Club, and immediately in my mind, I'm like, this is a perfect fit. They're covering, basically they were covering the cost of the program for up to 3 years, and then they'll raise the money, Boys and Girls Club, to continue to operate that site. We're providing the space. So what we found out real quick is we needed to do some transformation of the site. So the entire interior of that building has been completely redone, the existing building. But what they found out is not enough room to do both teen and youth, right? And teen is such an important piece. You provide opportunities so they're not doing things they shouldn't be doing. So that's really the focus there. And in order to do that, they needed more space, because you can't run teen and youth programming in the same space. So, we had some funding set aside, Boys and Girls Club, and when Governor Hogan was in office, we were able to secure a $350,000 grant through the Department of Public Works. So we had this matching fund from the city, and now it's kind of a joint effort. City still owns the property, but Boys and Girls Club and the state of Maryland are putting into the site being developed. So, pretty much half of that building is getting covered. And we just actually, tomorrow, we'll get bids back for the interior build out of that. And the hope is to have that completed. I expect it to be completed before September, when school starts back up. And that's just going to provide another space, because the partnership between Boys and Girls Club, they have exclusive use, but they know that, when their summer camp program or their evening program, if they're daytime programming, we still have that ability to book that site for other community groups, basketball practices, track practices in the evening. And, we're doing it at such a rate that it makes it affordable for everybody. You know, you can't go anywhere and get any indoor space for less than $100 an hour. And,
Right.
you know, I think we're doing $25 for two.
Right.
You know, we're just trying to cover the cost, right? Because normally, you know, this is providing opportunities for folks that normally wouldn't have the opportunity. So once that building gets online, Boys and Girls Clubs will run all that operation out of the new site. You know, we kind of have the old site where they can go into the gym whenever they're running programs. But, you know, they ran an 8-week summer program last year at Boys and Girls Club. It was $40 for the summer, from 9 to 4:30. That seems like a pretty good
great deal,
right?
yeah.
And I had 35 kids signed up in the summer program, and if they get a second building, we expand that to 70.
Right, and so helpful to that neighborhood.
Yeah, and the Boys and Girls Club is motivated. Like, they've already come to us about, hey, let's do something out on the west side of town,
Right.
you know, and we'll get there. Let's get this site completed first. But, you know, there's enough folks down here that they could probably do it. They just popped one up down in Pocomoke as well. So
Right.
now, you know, you've got 3 sites, Dorchester, Wycomico, and Crisfield.
Yeah.
So tough part with Boys and Girls Club finding space is they get these great old buildings, but you run into asbestos, you run into
Right.
lead, right? And then remediation sometimes is more than it is to tear
a
the
new
house.
one,
Yes, yep. So that, you know, we're really excited about that partnership with the Boys and Girls Club. They do great work. They really do, and they're committed to it. So I think that'll continue to grow too.
One of the themes of the show is I'm wrong about everything. And because I know I'm wrong about everything, I try to think things through a little bit better so I'm not wrong about everything. But Ann Street Village, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. But gosh, what a success that is off to a start.
Yeah, it's been trying, to say the least. First of all, that I think if anybody has followed this in developments, or we get
This is the homeless village
Yes,
over on Ann
yeah.
Street and the Church Street neighborhood.
Right, yeah. So we, you know, I think there was an idea that had been floated around for a couple, you know, at least probably a year, for a year that I was here, about this, and it was a result of COVID, you know, with this congregate housing or congregate shelters where you have people sleeping right next to each other, and all of a sudden here comes COVID. You got to have 6 feet of space between you and the person next to you. You know, you got to have sheets, or you got to have some type of plastic barrier. Well, you know, it's 50% or less at the shelters now. So you've essentially lost, you know,
Right.
some cases hundreds of beds. And then that wasn't just in Wycomico County. That was Worcester. That was Somerset. Any place that had a shelter. So this whole idea of non-congregate sheltering kind of came up. Well, hotels certainly weren't the answer, right? There's a lot of liability involved with the hotel itself, and it's expensive. And, you know, so we were just kind of looking at creative ideas. And, you know, Christine was at the time, I don't know if you know Christine
Chestnut.
Yeah, Christine was, you know, she was pushing this hard. And again, I'm supportive of, you know, if staff brings an idea to me, I'm going to be supportive of it if they think it's the best. That's their job. That's their area of expertise. So we got on board. We went down to Austin, saw community first, came back from Austin, 20-hour flight because, you know, whatever.
Right.
And I'm thinking, you know, I literally said it out loud. We're 18 months out from this even coming to fruition. Because, you know, I think at the time, Secretary Day was wavering on whether he thought that this was the best option.
And where to put it.
Yep. And, yeah, I had heard, you know, in 2 weeks, here's home's coming. Ann Street Village, or at the time it wasn't Ann Street Village, Tiny Home Community, I think we were calling it at the time.
Right.
So I was like, all right, find a place. You all right? And I want this done by April of 2022.
Right.
You know, and it was like, that was a little ambitious. And we had found a site, but it required annexation. And this, you know, there's a lot of back and forth behind the scenes that people don't see with other departments, and why this won't work and why this will work, and this is that and that's this. And ultimately, sitting in a meeting arguing about whether or not this space will work out on Marine Road, which I think was our original. Then somebody's like, well, what about Ann Street? It was a commercial property, and
Right.
and the city was trying to sell it. And they were like, oh, this may be an option. And I remember looking at the person who we were arguing back and forth.
Grace Church is right there. It's perfect location.
Yeah, and you know, we've learned through that process, like we could have been more transparent on the front end with folks, partners of ours in that neighborhood. But you know, we just kept our heads down and kept pushing forward, even though we just had barrier after barrier after barrier, and it was very frustrating, and maybe have lost a couple hairs throughout the process. But ultimately, what we've been able to learn through this process is we've been connected with all these other sites across the country that are operating this. So while we had that time delay to get this space open, we were hearing what was working, what wasn't working, what we would need to adjust. How can we be proactive in our approach? It's just like I think originally it was, we're going to just move 23 folks in. Well, we're not just moving 23 folks in. We're going to move a few in at a time, allow them to get acclimated, to adjust to that life.
Right.
And then 3 weeks later, we bring another 6 in. Well, now we have 6 individuals, which, was where we're at right now. Hopefully, that will then be able to help transition this next set of 6 people in. And then you have 12 people to do it. And then you're really trying to build this sense of community, ownership. That was big for me, and accountability. Like that for me is the piece where, I struggle with the homeless population internally is just, when does helping hurt? When do you stop helping? And I think that's always been an internal struggle for me. I've always asked that to my staff. At what point are you enabling?
Right.
And that's really, I think, we have a fairly balanced approach to this, and we all share ideas about what we think we need to do, what we can do, what we have the budget to do. But ultimately, when we make a decision, it's informed, and everybody's weighed in on it. And I think that's where, and even our attorney team that we worked with, they've been great through this process, getting us our program guidelines set up. That's going to have accountability factored into it, right? There's going to be responsibilities. If you're going to participate at Ann Street, if you're going to participate as our program participant, our expectation is that you follow these rules. You have to show that you're making an effort to transition back into society, and that includes substance abuse, that includes mental health, that includes job training, that includes making sure you have all your documentation, that includes making it to doctor's appointments, all these things that, we're going to continue to work with these folks. And then there is a time limit on the amount of time somebody can be there. This is transitional housing. It is not permanent housing. Our goal would be 1 year as these individuals come through. But we know that's not possible for some people. Some people don't have documentation. And with as slow as the federal government and coming back from COVID and trying to get caught up, if you try and get a passport right now, expedited, you're lucky if you're going to get it in 7 weeks. So we're trying to get Social Security cards for people that have no documentation. So that takes even longer. So 2 years is our max at the site. Because we have a housing shortage and we know we can't get a 1-bedroom for what we're getting from HUD right now, there will be some flexibility in that if it comes down to the fact that we can't find housing for an individual. But what we're seeing is community groups now reaching out to us like, how can we help on the back end of this? How can we provide housing for an individual that's transitioning out of Ann Street Village, which is great because that's really what we need to do. We're trying to source some funding that would actually, they've done it in Baltimore. I was just talking to a guy from Texas yesterday. They're doing it down there where they're building actual sites, like, apartment building, but it's specifically dedicated to folks that have been dealing with chronic homelessness. And that's kind of the approach, when you look at permanent supportive housing, which we also do. Permanent supportive housing is kind of just like this ongoing, it's the federal government program. Secretary Day talked about it a little bit at the ribbon cutting. It's basically just saying, well, we're going to help pay this forever. But the reality is, and you're seeing some transition now, like we have a grant, critical time intervention. It's through the Maryland Department of Health. That program is specifically geared towards working somebody out of the system, right? So getting them to the point where you don't need to follow up with them and make sure that they're seeing their doctor's appointments, taking their medication. They're working with substance abuse counselors if they have an issue, they have a property, they have a job. And you're seeing it. Georgetown just opened in January. Now, it's not all rainbows. Anybody thinks it's going to be flawless. There's just no way, but they've already found 10 individuals are working full time. 2 individuals have moved on with housing and a full-time job. That's pretty, I would say that's pretty remarkable when you think about it. Now, how do you measure success for a site like that?
Yeah, and just the way you guys, went through the bureaucracy and kept your heads down on this thing and got it done, it wasn't easy.
No, it wasn't. I mean, we were in the middle of the project and we were like, these things have to have fire suppression. Well, are they living, are they actually dwelling units, right? They don't have bathrooms, they don't have running water, but there is a bathroom with running water. Well, then fire suppression systems aren't cheap. But that's all about relationship building, and that's how you can get things done sometimes cheaper than you can anywhere else, right? Is building relationships, people have a vested interest in your community, and then relying on those people. It's just like we're doing on the back end right now with the, the non-endowment fund.
Right, there's a nonprofit foundation people can contribute to. You
Right.
want to give a plug for that?
Yeah, so it's Community Foundation of Eastern Shore. It is the homelessness program. If you get on Community Foundation Eastern Shore, the drop-down menu, you go to the City of Salisbury Homelessness, and then all that money goes either to Ann Street, which I would say the majority of it is going to Ann Street Village right now. But on the back end, we kept it open so that we can use it for other homeless services associated with Ann Street and what we do. If we were to ever come up short anywhere. We've had some pretty good success so far. I mean, we have money to operate, so that's a plus. But Community Foundation of Eastern Shore, it's a non-endowment fund, so we don't have to wait to get access to the funding, which is super important.
Right.
And the rate at which they gave us, it was just, that's how they helped us out, right? And they're going to continue to raise funds, and I think I think some people might be sitting back to wait and see. Hey, let's see how this thing looks, before. But there's so many people have stepped up, kind of like so many people have reached out since we've had our ribbon cutting, and not just from Maryland, all over the place. Many people from Maryland. How did you do this? How can we do something similar? Do you want to come here and do that for us? I don't think the City of Salisbury is going to pay me to go do it somewhere else, right? But, and then, is the other fear on this whole thing was, if we build it, they will come, right? Are we going to have more folks? So the way we set the program up, and we have very, very many documents on folks that have been homeless in Salisbury because we've been operating the program since 2016. That's a requirement of the program, until we run out of folks that are chronically homeless in Salisbury or Wycomico County, we're not taking anybody out from the outside of our county. We're excited. It's going to build as it goes. As I mentioned, we're 3 weeks out from here's home, and that's kind of where it was like, well, because we better get the strategic plan in place. And, we're going to learn as we go, just like everybody else that's operating these sites. But I think I am confident that it's going to be successful. We just have to provide the right types of services to these folks.
How can people reach Ron Strickler?
Well, they can call the office. It's 410-341-9550. Or they can reach me at rstrickler@salisbury.md.
He's Ron Strickler. He's Director of Housing and Community Development for the City of Salisbury. It's a tough job. Someone's got to do it. He's doing it, and we're thrilled he had time to be with us here today. Thanks so much, Ron.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. Another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and one-on-one. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.